for watching another one of my ballistic comparison videos. This is another addition to the series I've been doing for the last couple months and comparing ballistics for specific calibers. This is the comparison between the 30-06 and the 270 Winchester. These two guns have been compared over and over and over again. The 270 Winchester came out in direct competition to the 30-06. They're based on the same case. The 270 is just a smaller bullet. The case has been necked down. It's typically a flatter shooting round than the 30-06, but the 30-06 can push a little bit bigger bullets. So quite a bit of versatility to both these. So let's go ahead and get started. We'll start with recoil. The 30-06 here you can see at the 150 grain at 2910 and 17.6 foot-pounds of energy recoil sire. And it's moving back at 11.9 feet per second. The it's 165 has 29 at 2900 feet per second, has 20.1 pounds of energy, and is moving towards you at 12.7 feet per second. And then the 180 grain, it's traveling a little bit slower, 20.3, 12.8. Down here you get the 130 grain from the 270, 16.5. It doesn't show the feet per second here, and if you want to know more details, this is taken from Chuck Hawk's recoil chart. Very interesting chart to go study and see what guns, how they recoil, and the different velocities they come back at you in the different weights. But let's skip to the 150 grain, 17 pounds. So you can see that the 270 does recoil quite a bit less, but it is smaller bullets, narrower bullets, so it has a little bit less impact coming back at you. Let's go down to factory ammo available from Hornady and various sources, federal, including their Nosler bullets. 270, we have the 145 grain ELDX precision ammo. I really like the ELDX precision ammo because it has very high ballistic coefficient efficiencies, and performs very well. Here we have the 145 grain, 500 yards. It's traveling 2157 feet per second. It has 1497 foot-pounds of energy with a 37-inch drop. Next we have the 140 grain SST, 2189 feet per second, 1490, a 35-inch drop. So this one's traveling quite a bit faster from the muzzle. It does not have as good a ballistic coefficient as this one, which is why the energy is not as high, even though the feet per second is higher. But it does have less of a drop. It's a little bit flatter shooting. If you're going to be hunting bigger game, I would recommend against using the 140 grain SST because they have been known to fragment a little bit more. So you might be picking out a little bit more lead, especially on tougher skinned animal like elk. The ELDX has a better controlled expansion than the SSTs. But these are great for deer, for smaller, lighter skinned game. They perform exceptionally well. Down we have the 130 grain SST, moving 2216 feet per second, 1417 foot-pounds of energy, drops 33 inches. This is incredibly flat shooting rounds here out of the 270. 130 grain GMX, very similar to the SST, 2208 feet per second, 1407, 33.9 inch drop. And then we have the 130 grain Interbond, and this is identical to the SST. I don't know if Hornady just renamed it the Interbond, but it is sold separate by the separate name from Hornady, but the performance is identical. I'm not sure what the terminal performance is, but as far as we can see here, the foot-pounds, feet per second, drop, everything's the same as the 130 grain SST. Down here we have the federal ammunition with the Nosler partition, 130 grain, 2012 feet per second, 1168. The partition is a very good hunting bullet. It does not have the ballistic coefficiencies of the modern bullets. It's been around a long time, and that's why you see the 130 grain perform so low compared to some of these other ones up here. 1168, we're a couple hundred foot-pounds of energy lower, 250 or so, and it drops quite a bit more. It's because it's an older design, older bullet. They have the new AccuBonds, and we'll get to that in the hand loading section. But the new AccuBond and the AccuBond long range, they perform the terminal performance is similar to the partition, but they have the new bonding technology, and the ballistic coefficiencies are much higher, so it travels better to your target, doesn't drop as much, and maintains its energy better. Down here we have we'll go ahead and continue. We have the 150 grain partition, 1928 feet per second, 1238 with a 52-inch drop. And then we have the ballistic tip, 130 grain. That's 2,046 feet per second, 1209 foot-pounds of energy, 45-inch drop. This one's a more modern bullet, so it does have a little bit better ballistic coefficiencies than the partitions do. For the 30-06, we have the 178 grain ELDX. It's not rated as high as this guy up here as far as ballistic coefficiency goes, but it is a bigger bullet, so it will have a little bit more energy. 1993 feet per second, 1570 foot-pounds of energy, 44-inch drop. You'll notice that the 30-06 has several inches more drop than the 270, but it also carries more energy. You look at these, and almost all of them have more energy than the 270 available counterparts. Next, we have the 180 grain SST that has 1513 foot-pounds of energy, drops 44 inches, 1946 feet per second. 180 grain GMX, again very similar to the SSTs, 1954 feet per second, 1526 foot-pounds of energy, 44-inch or 43.9-inch drop there. 165 grain SST, and I personally loaded these. These were one of my favorite bullets for my 30-06 when I owned it. But this is again from the factory. 2,000 feet per second at 500 yards, 1465 foot-pounds of energy with a 40-inch drop. So I think this is a pretty good performer there. 165 grain GMX, 1984, 1442 foot-pounds of energy, 41.3-inch drop there. 150 grain SST. This is starting to get to lose ballistic coefficient. The ballistic coefficiency is starting to go down on these because the weight's going down. It's turning more into a slug than a long, sleek bullet just because it doesn't have the weight to maintain the length and the diameter of a 30 caliber. Here we have 1370 foot-pounds of energy, 38-inch drop. Still a decent performer, but the energy drops quite a bit when you get to these. Then moving down to the Nosler partitions, 165 grain partition, 1210 foot-pounds of energy, 55-inch drop, 1818 feet per second. Again, the partition does not have the efficiency of the newer Hornady ammo. And then 180 grain partition, 1348 foot-pounds of energy, 1837. So it's actually traveling faster, and I believe that's because it has a higher ballistic coefficiency than this guy right here, which is why it's traveling faster. However, at a heavier bullet, gives you a little bit more drop, 58.7 inches. We have the 150 grain ballistic tip, 1932 feet per second, and 1243 foot-pounds of energy. And then the trophy bonded tip, this is a new ammo, and it performs quite well, better than anything else on the chart here. The trophy bonded tip is 2024 feet per second, 1637 foot-pounds of energy, 49-inch drop. So this is pretty good performing ammo right there from Federal. And then I did average out the energy at 500 yards. The 270 for factory ammunition averages 1355.38 foot-pounds of energy, whereas the 30-06 averages 1432.4 foot-pounds of energy. Again, this guy, he may have, that's about 80 foot-pounds more, which is not a ton, but it does come with a little bit more kick, especially when you get into some of the bigger bullets, the 180 grains, like these guys. This guy's will kick pretty good. That guy and that guy will kick definitely more than the 270 will. Let's move on to some hand loads. The ELDX bullets are my favorite hand loads right now. I am looking into the new Nosler AccuBond long-range bullets. I'm going to try those. But for right now, I really am liking these. I have the 7mm08. I did have the 30-06, and I did load some 178 grain bullets there, and I liked how they performed. You can see here, this is taking just the reload data from the manual. The best part about this, the 30-06, is you can load some of these heavyweight bullets down here. Stuff that, and you can even go to 220 grain, but I didn't include that because the ballistic coefficiency starts to drop. Let's start with this guy right here. It performs exceptionally well. These are max loads, of course. Max loads, so chances are you're going to be lower than this, but this gives you the peak performance that you could expect from this bullet. The 212 grain ELDX at 500 yards, 1987 feet per second, 1858 foot-pounds of energy, which is very good. It's especially for the 30-06. 57.9 inch drop. That's using 56.3 grains of the Superformance. Actually, all of these are using the Superformance powder here. But as you can see, the ballistic coefficient is amazing on these. This one is only 535, which is still pretty high, but these other two are really high. You can see the jump, 224 foot-pounds by going 22 grains, which is pretty awesome. It's because the BCs go up. The 178 grains, 1530 and 1967. So they don't have the correct load data in the 10th edition that I have. Hornady recommends you get the 10th edition for reloading this, but I was going off the AMAX information there, and it's not giving the performance that I'd like. I think, I'm not sure on this, but I think we can get more than that, because if you look at the factory, it's 1570 from the factory with 10-inch less drop. So this load data, I'm not sure why it's not performing very well. I haven't done any research. If I still had my 30-06, I could do some testing and figure out what works best. I know if you get the latest 10th edition, it will have the reloading data for the 178 grain ELDX, but the one I got earlier this year did not, or end of last year I guess, did not have it in there yet. But anyway, so that's what you get. 1754 for this middle guy. Still performs very good. 270 only has one option here for the ELDX, and it's not very great because, again, the factory load performs better. I'm taking the information out of my reloading manual from last year, and the performance is not that great. It will save you money reloading this versus buying factory ammo, but your performance isn't going to be as good. And this is 1410 foot-pounds of energy, 2097. So not even quite as good as factory loads there. Let's move on to some Nosler hand loads. Start with the 30-06. Again, the partition is their older bullet. It's not real efficient as far as its ballistic coefficient and flying through the air, but it does have great terminal performance, great controlled expansion, so it penetrates very well on, especially on larger body game, larger skin or thicker skin game. 150 grain. I have a couple of loads here, the most accurate and then the max. We have 1181 foot-pounds of energy and 1883 for the most accurate load. For the max load, you have 1253, so 72 more, not a huge jump there. 1940 feet per second here. Now you go compare this to the AccuBond, which is their new version basically of the partition, using their new AccuBond technology to get better ballistic coefficiencies, but yet maintain the terminal performance of the partition. And here you see 1321, so about 140 there, 140 foot-pounds better. It's using the exact same load data. Nosler has the same load data. They group their bullets together. So the same load data will give you 140 foot-pounds of energy more on the most accurate load for using the AccuBond. Just by changing the bullet, you're getting 140 foot-pounds energy more, 2-inch less drop. It's moving 120 feet per second more. And then the max load, 1399 foot-pounds, 2050. So you could be, depending on your gun, you might be anywhere in between those two. If you want to just go off what they do, stick with that guy. Of course, it will vary slightly depending on your gun and how meticulous you are at reloading. I'm sure these guys do a very good job making sure. Making sure everything is right on the money when they're doing their tests. And let's move down here. 180 grain partition, 1143. So it's this is not a good performer. It's performing less than the 150 grain here, and it drops 10 inches more. Go move up to the AccuBond though, and you see a significant difference here. You have 1566 foot-pounds of energy in 1979, 52-inch drop. So much better than the partition here. The 200 grain AccuBond, 1641 on the most accurate, 1741 on the max loads. 47-inch drop. You're looking 11 inches difference between these two. If I remember right, this is a pretty light load here on the Nosler chart, whereas this is, you know, the max load all the way at the bottom. 200 grain partition, 1414, 1501. This one has a little bit better ballistic coefficient, but it's not as good as this guy. You can see 240 foot-pounds of energy more there, and 220 roughly there compared to the AccuBond. And then you have the 220 grain, horrible. This is like shooting a slug. I would never load this personally, but I thought I'd include it because it is still available and the load data is still there from Nosler. 999 foot-pounds of energy on the most accurate and 1121. So you're lower than every other option here, yet you have the biggest bullet and probably the most kick. And so that is one load that I would never do. I just included it because it is available. I included all of the partitions for both weapons, or both calibers, and so I didn't want to leave that out. Let's move on to the 270 Winchester. We have the 130 grain AccuBond. Let's see here. This is the most accurate. 2103 feet per second, 1277, 43-inch drop. This is where the 270 does shine a little bit more. Definitely lower drop, and it has lower kick as well. 1309 foot-pounds of energy for the max load, 2130 feet per second. So you look at the drops, and you compare those up here to their first. Oh, sorry, too high. To their first AccuBond, the 150 grain. So you're 5 inches less drop there, 2 inches less there. This does perform pretty well, this AccuBond here, but you can see that the AccuBond down here from the 270 is fairly close in performance. You have the 140 grain partition, performance 1155 foot-pounds, 1260 on the max. Again, go look up here. It is pretty much on par with that one there. 140 grain AccuBond, so just switching the bullet, their load recipes are the same. You get 1297 foot-pounds of energy for the most accurate and 1411. So you can see a significant difference there, 150 foot-pounds of energy more, 152, just by switching out that bullet right there. And then let's continue. The 150 grain partition, big bullet for the 270. It's 1190 foot-pounds and 1326. So it's a little bit higher ballistic coefficient, gives you a little bit better than the partition for the 30-06 there. And then you have this guy, the long range. Those perform exceptionally well. 1467 foot-pounds of energy, 20,098 feet per second there, and then 1626 on the max. You're looking 50 and 45-inch drops there. And then they have 160 grain, which I wouldn't do personally. 1159, compare that to 1467, and this will give you probably about the same kick, if not less. And then 1239 there. Alright, so, and I did down here I have the average energy load for both guns, and then showing you the cost roughly. The most accurate average load is, the energy level is 1323 for the 30-06. The average max, again, these is for all the Nosler loans, is 1389. And then the 270, the average most accurate is 1257. And then the average max energy is 1361. So again, you could be anywhere in between these two numbers right here, this one and this one, depending on your gun and your reloading techniques and how good you are at reloading. But that's most accurate, that's max. So they are both very similar bullets, or very similar cartridges. They perform very similar. And then just to give you a cost here, I did the math on using RL19, makes 118 rounds. So 118 rounds for 1 pound, 22 cents per round, and it's going to be about the same for your 270. They both use about the same amount. Anyway, thanks for watching today. Hope you enjoyed the comparison. If you have any questions, post those below. If you have any requests on calibers that you would like to see compared, go ahead and post that request below as well in the comments. And I hope you subscribe. I hope you find value in the videos I'm doing. I'll continue to do these. And if you do, please subscribe and don't forget to share my channel. Thank you very much.